and it's like this weird, almost like if Groot and a gnome fused together, but like it looks cool, right? It looks really
gnome thing. I think it's something kind of cute, but that thing is not cute. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Niisan podcast, episode 11.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm one of your hosts, Josh Xell Crim, and with me is my crime and partner, my partner in crime, criminal.
Partner in Crim?
Yeah.
Anyways, my name is Crim, also known as the Asian Avenger, and as always, it's awesome to be here. This is a fun episode, also a dark episode, so I'm excited to get into this.
Yeah.
But before we get into this, right, first off, I think the one thing we want to say is thank you to everybody at home listening. Thank you to everybody that's watching. Hell yeah, episode 11. The support you've all shown so far has been absolutely amazing, and we are excited to continue to keep doing this podcast week by week.
Yeah. That's all I have to add to that.
Yeah. And on top of that, why don't you lead us in with, actually, before we get right into our main topic today, because our main topic is about like horror and just like, if you've watched our past episodes, I've been on this search for horror, whether it's manga, anime, whatever, right? In the anime spheres. And it's been a struggle. There's either been a lot of bad stuff or just like, or it's the content's very scarce. So, before we go into that though, I think we got to talk about some sweet news that's gone on in the world of anime. So Josh, why don't you lead us into that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think is there's a lot of Jujutsu Kaisen news. So the movie is officially announced, and they gave a more description, I guess, onto it. I guess some people assumed had already known about this a little bit, but the Jujutsu Kaisen is going to be kind of like a prologue a little bit, especially concerning what's his face? I forgot his name, Megumi, right? And going into his little his backstory a bit, which I think is interesting. And then not only that, Jujutsu Kaisen is also announcing a mobile game. Of course, time to get those whales in there. You gonna play those? Yeah,
you know, for
we
a
talked
fact,
about this last episode.
I'm gonna play it.
You're gonna spend $200 rolling for Nobara's ultra rare card, and when you eventually don't get it, you're gonna be like, Josh, why did I do that? And I'm gonna be like, I told you. When
I'm like, hey Josh, I don't have a home, I don't have a car anymore, I need to come crash at your place, and because I tried to roll for Nobara and I didn't get it. On top of that, the gameplay sucks because for a fact how, like, we had just talked about it recently, the last episode going in the world of video games and anime. I haven't had the best luck with it, and I have not been finding my enjoyment out of it. And as much as I love Jujutsu Kaisen, how much is this game gonna really excite me? Because I think of all the mobile anime games I played before. I played the Mob Psycho mobile game. That sucked. I know you laugh, but like somebody's got to try these, right? Someone's out there and as we had mentioned, doing God's work, if you would.
Oh my God! I swear, everybody who's listening to this is just face palming. They're like, Crim, why? Why are you?
We
doing
knew it
this?
was bad. Look,
there was no question.
You never want to miss out, because like, what if it is really good though? Like it could be pretty good. It hasn't been. Actually, every time it's been pretty bad. but until it isn't, okay? You got to remember, until it isn't. We had bad superhero movies for quite some time. And like we saw the tides change a little bit, and we're not even at that point yet in anime video games, but soon we'll get the Iron Man of anime video games, and then we're gonna be popping off, and I'll have been there after slogging through years and years of a sinkhole for my money.
I mean, apparently that was supposed to be Genshin, but whatever. That was last week's episode. Let's talk about some more news. I think that you can lead us into this one about
Actually, I feel like this is gonna be one of the things that another thing before we move on is however, the movie, this I'm living for, right? Because we don't actually know a lot about Megumi. Right?
Yeah, I was okay. Yeah, if we want to talk a little more in depth about it, like I think this makes the most amount of sense to have for a movie rather than like trying to propel the next season. Because like we talked about it in our episode, I don't remember what it is, but you guys can look up our episode where we talk about anime movies, where we talked about concerns with anime movies in general and like sort of the trend. But this actually kind of subverts it a little bit because it's not about the next set of content, right? It's not the next season is going to be done through this movie. Instead, it's this kind of side story in Megumi. And so, like, I personally think this makes a lot more sense to do in movie format. So my concerns 100%. Are sort of gone, and I'm at this point I just want to know. And again, I don't read the manga, so I don't know if like they actually did do a manga either like spin-off or they like held the main story to talk about Megumi's backstory. Like, I don't know the origination of where the movie's content comes from. However, that's it. I'm still excited. So
there is like a zero, like issue number 0.
But did that come before Jujutsu Kaisen even started, I guess, is my question.
You know, like timeline-wise, I don't even know when it's released. I only know the main story that I've got, which is like issues 1 through 10. And those are the ones I know about. I haven't even read 0 yet. Yeah. So I don't even know if it's actually available now. So I'm excited, and I'm going to see how much of it is going to be from that. All I know is that I'm excited to see more Jujutsu Kaisen coming out in the entertainment spheres of how, like, whether it's movies, games, and all of that.
Yeah, I think this is a win-win for all Jujutsu Kaisen fans. So I'm personally excited. So
hell yeah, and you know, for something that I'm also excited about. Well, okay. I'm excited about it. Some of us here, if you remember from an older episode, aren't excited about it. Is something that's based off another anime is Cowboy Bebop. So we have Cowboy Bebop, the show, coming to Netflix, and that's been a known quantity. We had talked about that a while back, and you know, we had a bet. I still am in the camp that this is going to be a good show, movie, whatever it becomes. It's going to be solid. Right, I love the cast. I love all that. Xell here
just
doesn't
like
believe
all the
that.
mobile games you played. Yeah, I see a trend here.
I knew those were bad. Okay, I knew those were bad. Okay, we're not opening that can of worms. But once again, I knew those were bad. And I will say though, this looks like it could be good, and luckily, Netflix has just launched their Geeked Week, which kind of gives you a little bit more of an insider on all their, their content, their shows, their movies, all that stuff being made at the Netflix, in the world of Netflix, right? And so we got a first look at the cast. And it isn't like, them in costume, full costume, or like a trailer, at least not by the time when we're filming this. Who knows? Maybe something can come up in the next week or two. But when we went at the point of filming here, we've seen John Cho as Spike, we've seen our Jet, and we've seen our Faye Valentine. They aren't in costume, except for John Cho already has some of the longer hair. Now, I assume in the movie, either A, that's going to be dyed a darker green, or it's probably going to be just like how it is in the little, snippet of him that we see now.
I think it's meant to be like more naturalistic. That's my inclination. Right. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
I think you're probably right, and that we won't get the greenish like Spike hair. Yeah. However, the next that we know about that, and that's not major news. However, there is some major news that came with this announcement, and it is that we are getting the original. The person who wrote the original score is coming back to make the music for the show, movie, the live action, right? That is pretty badass because we all know that opener, like there's no way we can forget that. That is a very iconic intro.
Although, is that the person who wrote that song? Because I thought that was a different jazz band that, like, the OST writer is different than the person who makes the openings, right?
Right. Well, actually, no, I thought they did that. Hold on.
Because it's the Seatbelts who did the intro. Unless that guy's part of the Seatbelts? I don't know.
They have, so specifically they have Cowboy Bebop intro song, right?
Also, I just want to go back about John Cho for a hot second because the way I found out that about John Cho and how he's going to be Spike Spiegel and all that, like I knew he was going to be Spike, but I didn't know what he was going to look like. The reason why I stumbled across that was on Twitter. There was a trending thing where it was like John Cho's hair, and I was like, what about John Cho's hair? And I saw like people were gushing about how much they love John Cho's hair and how it represents Spike, and I thought it was really cute. Yeah, and, big shout out to John Cho, and it looks, Spike's hair. If you were to do a 1-to-1 cosplay of it, you'd need to have like a giant head to fit all that hair. And so like I thought John Cho's thing was like a very good kind of like more realistic take on what Spiegel's hair would really look like in real life, which I thought one, that was cool. I like that a lot. And then two is it like legitimately looks pretty decent on John Cho, and I thought that was the other cool part. So.
And by the way, so the intro is it is composed by Yoko Kanno and the Seatbelts.
Gotcha.
So I believe we are getting that score team back, and that is pretty rad. So like, because like a lot of the Bebop comes from that, right? I mean, that's how we have the Bebop. Without the score, we wouldn't have any of it. So I'm here for that. So they're already trying to stay true to what the anime was. Right, like at least down like from the music standpoint, which means that if they're paying that much attention to detail, I have to think they're gonna do even more.
Yeah. Also, quick correction here too. Yoko Kanno was a lead member of the Seatbelts, and she's legendary. She's done so much work. I don't know if I accidentally misgendered her as well, but she was part of the Seatbelts. So I just found that out. So that's cool. That is super cool. So musically, pretty good.
Right.
John Cho looks pretty good.
Amazing. I love where they're going with Jet so far, and I like like the actress they've chosen for Faye. I'm excited. We have a nice little well-rounded cast here.
Could it be? Have we discovered Atlantis? Is this the
chosen one? This is either I'm going to be very sad and quoting Obi-Wan from Revenge of the Sith when he fights Anakin, or this is the one, right? This is the chosen one, and this will bring us that live action anime adaptation that we've been waiting for. Now, I don't want to go entirely in on that because that's a whole nother episode, but I'm just saying right now, I'm getting good vibes. If they're going to get the original team for musically for the music, that shows they're paying attention. They're paying attention.
Okay, right? I will say like there are really good flags here, right? I do think that they've shown that they understand the source material to a certain extent, where they brought in Yoko Kanno. John Cho looks like a great Spike Spiegel, so we'll see. Yeah. I'm just not holding my breath on it. I think there are plenty of ways this can still fail, but I'm not wanting it to fail, right? I'm not I'm not a hater in that regard. I'm just remember I've been hurt too many times, okay? At some point, you have to just cut your losses.
You gotta love again, Xell. Okay, you don't just stop loving, all right?
Well,
you gotta go
prove
back.
It, all right? It's like
they're showing the signs of a good thing.
Or it could be the type of thing where it's like, I can change, I can be better, and they don't, So
it's the same again.
It's just another abusive boyfriend at it again.
Oh God!
So I'm just saying, it could be. So until I see the guts, right? Until I see the actual thing, I'm still on the side of negativity.
Everyone has the right to be skeptical, but I'm just going to lean on the side of optimism because this just seems to start off right. And if it starts off that means it shows that you can make good live action adaptations, and other studios will also then start investing the love and the time into it. So that's not all, right? We also have a lot more to do with Netflix. Netflix is really going at it, like content wise, like everything they have on that platform. And as you know, they've been acquiring rights and getting stuff, exclusive contracts, and trying to almost mirror the anime collection and depth that Netflix Japan has. So when I was in Japan, the Netflix there leagues ahead of what we have here when it comes to anime. And also I was able to watch SpongeBob in Japanese. And the voice acting of SpongeBob, I was wild. I loved it. So anyways, Patrick doesn't have a deep voice. Patrick has a high pitched voice. So this is going to be in line with that. And a little bit of the topic today is they've got a lot of horror stuff, animated horror stuff coming down the pipeline here. So they just announced that they're getting the person that did Vampire Hunter D, Final Fantasy. The artwork for this, by the way, Amano, you probably remember his iconic art, is going to be doing a good amount of the artwork for their shows. Let's see here. What's the name of the show again? So we have two. There's first off, there's the show, and then there's a live action movie, right? Or not a live action movie. There's an original movie. And so the show is actually going to be called Exception, and not Inception, Exception. And then the original movie is called Make My Day. Now, that's going to be relevant, right? Because this is very important because we don't have like Netflix has been just getting a ton of sweet horror franchises and like a bunch of sweet like horror movies and all this other stuff. And we're now getting, I'd been asking for more horror in the anime space. And now we're finally getting a lot of that. So I don't know much, like, because none of us really do, right, about like the projects that have been mentioned, but we do know that they are happening. And that means that Netflix, because when you look at Netflix's track record, right, we've gotten Castlevania. We've seen them do right by us there. We've also seen them just do Tresse, which is really good, a really good show, and it was only 6 episodes, and it was awesome. It was based out of Manila. It showed you a lot of the corruption that goes on politically, but also gives you the more spiritual side, and like shamanism and all of that. And I thought that was really good. It was able to give us the dark that the dark, the supernatural that I've been wanting. And so, yeah, like this is the horror anime Exception is based on a new story by an author, Atsuichi. They've done Ultraman Greed, Chronicles of the Clueless Age, stuff like that. And they've got the artwork, the painter from Amano, who as I said. So like this is looking like it could be good. They have a poster up for Exception, and it's like this weird, almost like if Groot and a gnome fused together, but like it looks cool, right? It looks really
gnome thing. I think of something kind of cute, but that thing is not cute.
Well, that is what a Groot and a gnome would look like. Okay, so and then they have, of course, Make My Day, which is going to be a sci-fi thing and a sci-fi horror-esque. So this is good, right? Like this is a good thing. I've been asking for more horror. And now we're getting that. And Netflix seems to be spearheading it. And right? Well, first off, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, so first off, I just knew that Crim has always, for everybody who's listening, and just like when Trace came out, like Crim's like, hey, Josh, there's a new horror thing out. And I was like, that's Crim, pat on the head. Because like Crim loves horror stuff. And like for me, I'm not a huge horror fan. It's not that I don't like it, but especially within the context of anime has always been sort of disappointing. And like, I think like the stuff is cool. It's great that they have Yoshitaka Amano on it. Like, obviously I love his works from Final Fantasy and stuff like that. But like, that tells me nothing about the actual
the Liliana art
of the thing.
War of the Spark, by the way. Magic players out there.
I mean, TBH, I like that art because it's done by Amano, not because I like the art. Ooh, I don't know.
Whatever, Josh. Whatever. I get it. I understand. But yeah.
And so, like, I hear about the stuff and I'm interested, right? And I guess this kind of transitions us into a little bit more of the meat of today about horror anime, because in my opinion, my soapbox is that horror has traditionally not been very good in anime form for whatever reason. And TBH, like, I've been thinking about this for some time and I still haven't nailed down why I feel that way. And there are things that have horror elements that do well, right? Like, I think, Castlevania is a good example. Like, it has horror elements, but it's not like implicitly a scary thing, right? And so like it's just gory, it's violent, it has like vampires and zombies, which are, we consider those things horror themes, but like in terms of things that are actually scary, I don't really get that. And so if this stuff is, Make My Day or Exception, and when you look at Exception's art, it looks like it's trying to scare you, right? Like when you see that is a creepy guy thing, and it looks like the intent,
call what it is, Groot and a gnome.
Again, when I think of Groot and a gnome together, I think of something cute, like a Groot and a gnome together. I don't know.
We see very different things, apparently.
Groot is cute, and gnomes, well, they're
Baby
not cute,
Groot
but they're
is
just
cute.
like.
What about Groot and a Lalafell? That would look like that, right?
Okay. Anyways, semantics on the fusion aside, like I think that the intent here is that it's trying to be scary, and the thing is, like, I think about the horror anime that already exists, right? And in my head, I think of the stuff like Junji Ito that was animated, or Higurashi. And I know people love Higurashi, and I tried to watch it, and I guess I didn't get super into it. And like, I just feel as though anime for some reason struggles in this regard, and I can't really put my thumb on exactly why. And like, there are even things that come from horror-based manga that gets ported over to anime that I'm also not super a fan of. Like, for example, I think Gantz, because we talked about this a little earlier. Like, Gantz is something that has its foot in horror, right? Like, it's got some horrific monsters. Like, the character design, the monster designs in Gantz, if you've read the manga, are incredible. The artwork is insane, and yet the anime sucks. You know, it's like, it's not good. And I wonder now. This is my theory. Okay, my theory is that in terms of scaring you, you need to establish some level of
like immersion. Right?
Immersion, yeah, exactly. And like, video games can do that, because I think video games are an inherently immersive platform. I think manga can even do horror well. Like, I love Junji Ito's short stories because there are missing frames. There's like, they can play with the unknown a little bit. But somehow when it's like full animated animation wise, there's just some level of like disconnect with me on like the horror that they're trying to build up and create. And that's like the thing that I don't know. I don't know why it is. I don't know if it's like, maybe it's just like the typical art style of it, or like I really don't know. And so I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are, and like, why do you think maybe that the horror genre suffers from anime, not because it inherently doesn't work with the genre like I think, but mainly because like it just, there isn't enough of it? Like, I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
So my thoughts with horror, right? Like, I think when you put the umbrella term of horror, the one thing everybody thinks about is that it has to scare you. And that's the only kind of horror, right? And that's how the you know, I would say that modern American cinema perceives horror. That's why it's overloaded to the top with jump scares, right? Now, I think horror doesn't necessarily mean that. Horror can just be touching on the topics of like things in horror, right? Like, so demonic possession, demons, devils, all of that. So, I mean, with that in mind, you could even say like Demon Slayer has elements of horror, right? Mm-hmm. And like, so I think what horror is for me, and I think by what definition is like, it can be scary, but horror can also be a repulsive thing. Like, so the gruesomeness of Castlevania can have is horror, right? Mm-hmm. Even the gruesomeness of like, this may sound like a joke, but High School of the Dead. There is gore there, right? There's other stuff, but like,
titties, so scary.
Fan service. But on top of that, fan service. And so I think that scares are only one part of horror. You can still get the shock value, right? You can still have the aesthetics and the elements of horror that are there. They don't all just have to be like scary, and that's how I look at anime. Anime doesn't need to scare me, because you're right. You are right. That's why, you know, so many of the, you know, the horror animes and things like that get adapted don't really port over all that well, because the artwork carries them from the manga, right? Like, the artwork looks like Junji Ito. Right? Like, I didn't even know they came out on Crunchyroll, a little series where they animated some of his shorts. You had told me about it. I watched it, and I'm like, this is really bad. Like I didn't watch all of it. I only watched 2 of the animated shorts, and I'm like, this is nothing like what I read. Because what's scary is the art style on the pages, the still, like the way the stills of it is terrifying. It burns into your memory. It burns into your mind and everything like that. So when you close your eyes, you see it. the animation part of it, you don't. It's this movement, and it's also just bad. So, like, I think that's a big problem.
How much do you think of it is just studio? Because that series that was done for Junji Ito was animated by Studio Dean, and Studio Dean is kind of famous for bad adaptations. So, like, do you think, like, a better studio could do that one justice? You know, like, I've thought about this because I was like, I watched that Junji Ito thing being like really excited because I'm like, yeah, Junji Ito, he's great. And like, how, like, whatever could this be? Like, how scary could this be? And I watch it and in my brain, because when I was watching the first few episodes, it's like, a lot of it almost seems comical, you know, and I didn't know if that was intended or if just like Studio Dean botched it. And like, so I think
they botched it. I think they botched it because they, you know, when you watch horror movies, like at least currently, American cinema has figured out that horror movies of old is all the slasher. They actually try to scare you. But then, like, nowadays, horror movies actually have a good amount of comedy added into it.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, and you think of like what is it? Get Out,
Shaun of the Dead, or like even Get Out, or like all the horror movies. There's a good chunk of comedy, and you're also seeing lots of like comedy, like people with comedy backgrounds. Like let's just go with John Krasinski, who's Jim from The Office, Jordan Peele. Lots of comedy background who are killing it in the horror movie game. Right? You have
how much of that is just like them subverting the horror genre? Because like, I guess when I think of horror movies, right, in general, the first ones that pop to mind are, yeah, sure, like Dawn of the Dead, or
The Exorcist.
The Exorcist, the Shining?
Yeah, well,
no, not that
Shining,
one.
I would say Shining and The Exorcist, or yeah, even The Ring, right? Like I would say those were like those became hits and classics for a very big reason, and it's because they didn't need to jump scare you. There were some things that were jump scary, but like how many of us watched The Shining and remember the bathtub scene with the lady getting out of it? No jump scare. You just watched her slowly get out of it. You knew what was going to happen. And you're like, oh my God, the chills from my spine of how it's shot. She's slowly coming up and you know, it's not going to be good, right? It's not High School of the Dead. This isn't going to be great. So like the thing here is, you knew what was coming, and it kept your eyes glued to the screen, and you were terrified. Like that image burnt into my mind as a child. Probably not a good thing, but like it burnt into my mind, and I remember seeing The Exorcist.
That explains a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I won't discredit that. I used to go to Blockbuster and for fun, scare myself by looking at all the box cover arts. And I'm just like, oh, that's scary. But like, I'm like also like kind of like, but also like, what if? Right? So I think with now and like how horror movies are going, I think anime just isn't going to give you that immersion that you're going to get from like a live action movie because, it's animated. And so when you look at the way the Junji Ito stuff was done, it seemed like the Studio Dean just wanted to kind of bring it up to date. And that I don't think that works because the Junji Ito stuff, the reason why it's scary is because the art style, right? And just like staring at the creepy eyes, the way they're drawn, and the concepts that he backs, like that the art's like kind of getting across, right? And I think that's why Junji Ito's stuff is really terrifying.
But I wonder if there's a studio. I wonder if there's a studio that can just do that. I
think they could.
And like,
I think they could.
I'm waiting for that, in my opinion. Like, there are definitely animation studios that can make creepy looking things like cool looking, right? Like, I'm trying to think off the top of my head, like what show has creepy elements to it, creepy looking monsters. I mean, sure, even Demon Slayer has some creepy looking things, like, and so like these studios can
think of the
do
Spider
it.
Boss, or not Spider Boss, but the Spider Demon, right?
Yeah,
kind of creepy, right? Like
creepy.
The images there are that's where there's horror elements, right? Like that is creepy. It's shocking to look at. It's a little bit repulsive.
So, but how about a series about that, right? Because like Demon Slayer, I would never go, oh yeah, that's a horror anime, right? Like, you would never say that, but it
would be horror action more action than horror. It's like action with a horror, with horror like aesthetics and bits and pieces sprinkled across.
Sure, but like I think when someone says Demon Slayer, like what comes up first in your mind is shonen, action, battle, horror comes like 5 tags later. You know what I mean? But I'm thinking
reasonably, I understand why though, because when you watch anime, how common do you see demons? Like demons, like the term, like they're all done in like, you know, anime styles, like hot big booby girl or you know, like hot shirtless demon lords, right? You know what I mean? Like they're all attractive as hell and they're always better than the angels, you know what I mean? And like the heaven sent people.
They went into like the Final Fantasy demons where they're like they're just really well dressed, suited up people with fangs. That's like that's a demon.
That's a demon. It's like that's not a demon. Okay, sure, I'll take it. You know what? Whatever. And I think we've seen demons so many times in anime that we kind of become desensitized to the idea of what a demon actually is, right? And we the imagery of a demon now is like, well, what about how not to summon a demon lord? Like
or
there's literally
or whatever. Yeah, no, there's like it's funny because demons exist in so many anime, but not in like a monstrous form, just very much like in. But I know. So the thing is that like for me, Japanese animation studios have all the tools. They do. They legitimately have all the tools. Like if you watch, you know, Dark Souls comes from a Japanese studio, right? And like those monster designs they're scary. They're legitimately freaky to look at. And like, by the way, new Elden Ring games look sick. I don't know if you watched the trailer yet. Have you watched the trailer?
I have not watched the trailer yet.
What? I got something that was horror related that Crim didn't get to first. That's crazy. Sorry. Anyways,
I know.
Watch the trailer. But like those designs are creepy and grotesque and weird, so like they can do that, and it's in beautiful CG, and they have good storytellers for horror. Junji Ito himself is Japanese, and then not only that, like The Ring was I don't actually remember if it was Korean or Japanese first.
No, you're thinking of The Grudge. That's Korean. The Ring was Japanese.
No, The Ring was also Korean. There's also a Korean Ring, but I don't know which one came first because there is a Korean.
I'm pretty okay. So I know the American one, the one that we're all aware of. Didn't that came from the Japanese version, right?
I just know that The Ring, the base story, is either Korean or Japanese. I know there is a Korean version a long time ago, and so I just wanted to throw
Juno is like I think like the Grudge, right?
The Grudge,
like the original Grudge, but yeah.
So anyways, my point is that like the Japanese know how to scare the shit out of people. Like that's
right.
That's not a concern. And so like for me, it's just like this. It's so weird that they haven't done an anime that is legitimately terrifying. That is like the thing.
Can they?
And I think there should be, right? Like I feel like there's no reason for it not to be. Just like how I think there's no reason there for not to be like a good anime live action movie. I think it's possible. All the pieces are there, but for some reason it just hasn't come together.
The only show I can honestly tell you that even scared me a little bit that was animated was Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah,
but why was that? Because they used live action parts and blended it in animation wise. Like when the moon was that creepy ass face, you know what I mean? Like, and I think the thing here is if you're thinking just typical anime, it's hard to get that immersion. And I'm not saying I don't want this. I would love, and I want every reason to find an anime that scares the living crap out of me. But like I just don't think it's possible. Or it's very difficult to pull off in it when it comes to typical anime, you know, art style, all that stuff, and the storytelling. I feel like most horror stuff eventually becomes a battle anime, and that's why, you know, like, and
like
that's
Resident
why
Evil.
I really enjoy. Well, okay, see, like Resident Evil is a prime example of that. It becomes like a shoot 'em up, right? So I think it's just not possible, but I don't think that that's the only outlet that you have of horror. And I think they can capitalize on the other parts of it because, example, you can get just, that's a creepy design. That's a creepy story and a concept. Sure, I'm not scared because the animation, but you still get that, ooh, creepy. And like that's all you need to do for it to be horror. And for some odd reason, we don't really have much of that. And Netflix, tie it all back, is out there killing it. Like they're not scaring me. It's not like I'm sitting there in fear when I'm watching Castlevania or Trece. But like the thing here is these are very heavily horror themed. It's horror first and supernatural than anything else. And then it becomes action, right? And they've done a very good job like direction wise when it comes to writing and all of that. And it's perfect, right? So I love that Netflix is now getting some more actual, like now from like more like anime, traditional anime studios and like contracts and stuff like that, trying to get horror going. And I think only Netflix has gotten it right. I don't know, something about it, like something about Netflix's horror animated stuff is killing it. And I love almost everything that they've put out, whereas everything else just sucks. Now, that's not to say that there aren't new animes coming out that are trying to still be horror, because I think another way you can go about it is horror comedy. Why don't we have enough of that? And so one of the mangas that I am really enjoying, or light novels that I'm enjoying reading, is Miruko-chan, right? Like, because it's slice of horror. It's the perfect blend of slice of life, but of like creepy ass, like supernatural things. Like it's a girl who sees spirits and all these other things, essentially. And it's got all the horror elements and whatnot, but also the dumb kind of humorous like tropes along the way. And I love that. And the light novel is great. The trailer for the light novel, for the anime, looks good. Like it looks like it perfectly crosses that threshold of humor and horror, and I love that. So I think it's been a long time coming, because right now we're now at a point where I think we're gonna get that good stuff, but it'll never be the scary stuff that you're looking for, but it'll be the good stuff in that it's still horror based and horror first, not like how Demon Slayer, right? Like horror is the 6th or something tag, right? Yeah. These are very much so horror first, or in the first 2 tags.
Yeah, I guess like under the sort of like looser definition of horror, like there has been some stuff that comes to mind. Like, I don't know how long ago this was. I think 2-ish years ago, there was a show called Boogie Pop, and Boogie Pop was kind of has that sort of like supernatural vibe going, where you're not really sure what's happening. And I really I thought that show was a sleeper, in my opinion. But yeah, there isn't a lot like that. And I guess like even when you talk about like offshoots of horror, I feel like, you know, at least specifically horror comedy, I feel as though they need to establish what horror looks like in that medium before horror comedy is like super successful. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'm really curious if Exception will be this thing that sort of like starts a horror trend, because I think horror films are they're just big, and at least in America, in Western media, and I mean, actually, not even just Western media, just horror stuff in general is popular, and it's clear to me that like people love this stuff, and you know, you have shows, because I'm just going to use Western media as an example, because I don't know enough about like where Japan is at and where other countries
you have
are
like
at.
Let the Right One In, which is a European horror film. There's tons of really good European horror films.
Yeah, I was going to say that like horror, though, one of the big reasons why it does so well in Western media is because it's cheap to make. Like, for example, the example of what was that movie series called, where it was like a guy with a camera and he's like recording
Blair
like
Witch Project?
There's that one, but there was the one more recent than that where
Paranormal Activity?
Yeah, Paranormal Activity, right? Like that was basically homemade, and so like, and that one made you know, that one was crazy.
It spawned like 6 movies, right?
Right,
like,
right.
So.
And so I'm like, okay, so there's clearly a demand for it, and so I don't know why that crossover feels like it's so underexplored to me. And
found footage horror is like the most immersive you can get your audience in, right? That doesn't work with anime.
I feel like it can though, right? Like it could.
A found footage anime could not work.
I think it could work. Just like just as like a story principle, like a guy picks up a camera and looks through it, and it's like I don't have to necessarily.
But it's anime. At the end of the day, no matter what, it's anime.
So you think like that type of like certain types of horror just cannot work whatsoever in animation. Because I think it's possible. I just think that for some reason, for some mystical, weird reason, it just doesn't work. But I think that it's possible. I think it's strictly possible. And like, even though I say, because I know earlier I was like, okay, there's no way because immersion has to be established. But like,
right.
I feel like you can establish immersion even through things that aren't necessarily realistic, you know? And I wonder.
I think that's true for other genres, but when it comes to horror, what is the biggest thing about horror? It plays to our psyche, right? It plays to our imagination. And the best way to do that is like, and that's why found footage was such a popular genre of horror, because it was so realistic in that it felt like you were just right there holding the camera, seeing these things, right? These are like real life things that you could see. When you animate all those things, it immediately pulls you out of that immersion. It's just, it legitimately could not work. It would be like,
but it happens in video games, right? Like I like when I played Resident Evil, 7, right? That's kind of like a found footage thing, right? Where you're like backtracking through this thing that you were in, and like that's animated, but it's scary. And I literally wonder if it's just because. And like that one,
playing and watching horror is very different, right? Like I can watch horror movies, but that doesn't mean that I don't get scared playing a horror game, because playing a horror game is way different, right? The immersion there is that you are actually now the character, because you have an investment in that you're controlling the character, right? So when you're in a movie, though, you only have yourself, right? Like, so you're like, okay, well, when I'm watching a movie, I can put myself in. Like like my suspension of disbelief is fine. It's doable because I can put myself in a found footage thing. That makes sense to me. But when when it instantly becomes animated, it's no longer scary. And lots of horror games use jump scares, except for PT, the what was supposed to be a Silent Hill sequel. That game was messed up on 19 different levels, and I love that. Like that was probably one of the most, if not scariest games I've ever played, and it's not even a full game.
But like PT is kind of a hallway simulator, right? Like it's not like
it is.
It's not like a traditional game in the sense that you have like a bunch of options and you have to like explore things and experience. Yep. Like it kind of just like comes at you on a monorail as you walk through this like hallway, right? And so I'm like, well, just do that with anime. Do you like why? Like you could just make it scary doing that. I don't know. I just feel like it's possible, and for some reason they just haven't done it. And I feel like I don't know. I just feel like you don't. Immersion can be done in like different ways. I don't know.
If you were to tell me, like, okay, I do believe that at some point you could make an anime that is animated and scares me. Yes. I don't think you could make a found footage style anime and have that scare me, because found footage banks on the realisticness of it. That's why that genre works the way it does.
We'll agree to disagree, Crim. I feel like
right, I mean, yeah, and I you know what? Prove me wrong. I hope you prove me wrong, because then
an animation studio. I'm going to
you do this. Then I can benefit, because I'm like, yo, that was a scary movie, dude. That was awesome. But actually, like legit, right? Like there's other ways.
I was gonna say too. Do you also think maybe the problem here is the difference between a scary movie versus a scary series? That was something that I was thinking about too, was that like the vast majority of anime stuff that comes out are in series format. And I feel like
you can still scare in a series. It exists. You think about Haunting at the House on the Hill or whatever, another Netflix horror show. And they did a very good job of making it supernatural and scary, and they scared you over 9 episodes, 10 episodes, hour-long episodes, which is essentially like almost 24. When you break down 20-minute episodes, you add them all up, that's like 24 anime episodes. So it can work in a serialized form and medium. The thing here is whether that's going to happen with anime. I don't know. I mean, not that it's going to scare you. So this is going to kind of like tie me back to why I think you got to go down another path. And that's where you get things like the one thing you can't do with real life that you can do in anime that I loved. Think about it, like School Live, right? Like that was messed up on levels, and because they were able to play with concepts of, they give you the cutesy anime girl, like, you know, schoolgirl stuff, and then you find out she's and that you don't even what, and like that hit me so like out of nowhere that I didn't understand it, and then it was just like, wow, that was a different type of horror because that was more psychological. It definitely made it so there was like the concepts there. And the things that they're putting at you, they're not using jump scares. They're scaring you they're scaring you with just like, whoa, look how messed up this situation is. She still believes she's that this is, you know, she's living a normal
high school life.
Right. And that's where the fear comes from. I think that to me is scary, but not in a typical sense where you're like, cover my eyes, but more like, I'm going to go to bed and I'm going to think about that.
Yeah.
Right.
I
And
guess,
so that's like how The Exorcist scared me. Yes, there's of course the makeup and stuff like that terrifies you, but The Exorcist scares you on a deeper level. And I think that's where horror can thrive too. It doesn't need to be jump scares. And it can scare you on a deeper level like that. And you wouldn't think that from how cutesy School Live looks. But then you watch it, whatever, like holy cow. And then of course, you have shows that are going to be just really solid in horror, like, you know, aesthetics and elements and writing, like Witch Hunter Robin. That was a big one for me. I thought that was a really good horror show. Hellsing Ultimate. And yes, there's in Hellsing Ultimate, there's, of course, you know, the suave parts of Alucard, but it is heavily horror influence. I think of it horror more than anything else. And Witch Hunter Robin did a very good job with that too. Essentially, it's Demon Slayer, but with less of the over-the-top action, and it's more horror first, then action.
This just reminds me, by the way, when you were talking about School Live, I was like, you desperately need to play Doki Doki Literature Club if you haven't.
I love Doki Doki Literature Club, and that is exactly that is how anime can scare you.
Yeah.
It won't scare you in the typical sense, but that's how you do it. The Doki Doki Literature Club ending, the School Live, that's how you do it.
I also think, though, that because when you brought up the fact, like, where could anime go with horror, right? And, like, how could they move this forward? And in my eyes, I feel like one of the ways they could do it is that anime can portray things that feel like they would be humanly impossible to project in, like, real life. And, like, I think about Berserk, the stuff from Berserk, the monsters that exist in Gaunt's and stuff, and like I wonder if it's just like literally if they just nail some sort of animation style to make things scary, you know, and they could do these sort of like horrifying monsters that like look super out of this world. Like, I don't know, man.
They
I guess
try that every time, and then we got, you know, like the monsters in like season 2 of the Promised Neverland in the woods. And that looked bad.
I think that one was bad. But like Parasite, right? Those monsters are really wonky looking, but they look cool.
And they're good.
I think like Alucard in Hellsing Ultimate, right? When he transforms into like his pure vampiric essence or whatever, like he looks freaking scary. And like, you know, so
but the animation is still in the same realm of how anime looks. Like, it's like, yes, they're cool creatures. Like Miggy looks cool, and all the other crazy slicing forms and all that. Like that was, like that had its spooky vibes, but it was still very much in the world of anime. So I guess what I was thinking when you said that is like, maybe they change up the style, like how Berserk got the 3D redo, like how Ruby art style, you have Aijin, like you have all of that stuff. And I didn't like that. They tried to do that. They try to make it like this out of this world, different dimension and 3D style animation. I don't think that's the way to go with it.
Did you watch the Golden Arc trilogy movies for Berserk?
I only watched the show.
Okay.
The old anime.
I wonder, because I thought the animation from the Golden Arc, because everyone memes on the Berserk show animation, because like there's a like animated part where he's like walking and he just is like, and he's like literally
there's like literally 2 parts. It's like you could tell like, oh my god, that's so poorly animated, because like the top half is like very much so movement and the other half is like still and robotic.
It just, for me, it looked like if this is his head, they were just like copy pasting him downwards to show that. Yeah,
it was like a GIF. It's like watching a GIF.
I thought the Golden Arc trilogy did some pretty cool stuff with the animation because, in particular, the third movie gets pretty off the rails, and so I thought that was kind of cool. And so like I don't know. I guess I feel like it's possible. Oh, there's another show that I wanted to talk about too. That I thought, have you seen the movie Paprika too? Like
yeah,
that one.
Paprika's great.
That one's got like some horror elements, right? Or is that more thriller?
It's
because that one was scary.
It plays to the side of definitely a little bit kind of like scary in the way that. I don't know. Like, did you ever watch The Boogeyman on the Disney TV show, the Disney Channel? It was like a Disney exclusive movie growing up. Okay, so it plays a little bit more to how I felt like Goosebumps scared me as a kid. It's not. It has horror parts to it, but it's not actually that scary. Mm-hmm. Although Goosebumps is way more horror than Paprika. I feel like Paprika still just felt way too like it had elements where it wanted to like scare you or like. More so weird you out than actually scare you. It's just like, oh, that thing looks weird or that feels weird, right? And they did a good job with that, but I don't think they did enough of that to make it full on horror. So Paprika was just a good animated movie that I felt like definitely had like some horror elements to it.
Horror elements. I guess like psychological thriller isn't really a horror.
Yeah. I mean, it can be. Those go hand in hand, right? It's just, but the way Paprika was done, it didn't feel like it was a horror to me. And it probably also comes with the art style too. Now, and this is where anime can take advantage of its art style. And School Alive is the prime example of that. It knows what it is. It knows it's anime. So it gives you the dualities of super bright colors, cutesy stuff, and then terrifying dark. And I'm here for that. And I think Witch Hunter Robin did a good job. Blood Sea, I know that's if you've been on the internet, you've seen Blood Sea. The gifts, Blood Sea is essentially the final destination of anime. And you get to see the most brutal anime deaths. And it understands it's anime, so it does the most ridiculous like kills. And it's very much so. Blood Sea is horror to me. And even like High School of the Dead, I know that's fan service, but if you think of it, it's a lot like like the classic horror slashers. Jason movies, all the teens, like, of course, they're like, bikinis like sliding off. It's essentially the same thing, right? Like, so like for me, that's High School of the Dead, I think is also a horror show, but more so made in the vein of like how American classic horror is. So you can definitely go about it, and I think it can exist. And I think more shows, to tie it all back, I think more shows need to move in that direction and not focus on trying to be super duper scary. So I think, like as in jump scares, I think something like Exception here, its art style alone looks like it could really creep you out. The writing of it can definitely creep you out. It can present tons of concepts that stick with you after the episode. And that's how that's how anime should scare you. And that's how anime can benefit or like move into the horror genre, like going forward.
Yeah. I guess like when I see Exception and I mean Make My Day, I was just looking up the Make My Day stuff and I can't make heads or tails out of anything. It just like
it looks like a sci-fi like alien kind of like horror.
They look like you see a little starship above a big hole and I'm like, okay, that could be Star Wars, I don't know. And then I looked up the Make My Day official site on Netflix and it's got literally nothing. It just has genres: Japanese horror anime, TV horror anime series. This show is ... scary and suspenseful. And so I was like, okay, this tells me literally nothing. But like at least Exception has that picture. And so I think of when I see that, I'm like, this one feels like maybe what I was kind of talking about, where like maybe the animation style itself could like lend itself to being immersive and scary. I don't know. So
we'll see. We'll see. We'll just have to see.
I'm curious what'll happen from there. And like, it's so weird to talk about this topic as I think about it. And I feel like I kind of talk myself into circles here. Cause like there just isn't that much that exists already in this genre. And even though we're getting some more stuff here and there, it's like, I don't even see like trends really. It's just, they just feel like little blips. And so I guess, I don't know.
I think the trendsetter is going to be Netflix. They're starting the trend.
We'll see.
Because they very much so understand, like they are doing it right. They're giving us dark animated stuff that we want. And they understand that because if you look at all the like, you know, the shows they put out, the dark animated stuff has been stellar. Trece, Castlevania, everything. And now Exception is looking to like, will shape up to be amazing. And or like at least visually so far, just from this one still, I'm getting chills looking at it. And but I know it won't be scary, but the creature design looks scary. And I'm here for this. I love this, and I hope Netflix continues to do this, and then I hope studios, like you're seeing like Miruko-chan, get made. And the creatures, at least from the light novel, are very scary looking. Like from what I read in the light novel, it is very, very scary looking. Will it scare me in the show? Probably not. But it will, but like the visuals of the creatures will stick in my mind. And I think that's the way they're going to do it. And once again, right now we don't have enough content out in this, like, you know, in the world of anime, because it's so hard to pull off, and not many people try to pull it off because they'd rather take, you know, they'd rather do the 4,000th isekai of the season than do this. And I'm like, look, you know, Born in Another World, that's cool and all, but like, what about demonic possession and like exorcisms and like you could imagine. Like Blue Exorcist, they could have done it, but instead they turned it into a shonen, right? Like they literally were dancing around the idea. Why not have an anime where you follow priests and people like and do exorcism? I think that's why I love Jujutsu Kaisen, because Jujutsu Kaisen heavily draws like the way I read like the narrative and the way I read the story and the way everything sets up. It reads like how 3 teenagers went into a cabin. They were never seen again. Like they draw heavily from the storytelling of how horror movies do it. Yeah. And I love that. And I think that's why I love Jujutsu Kaisen. It's got the perfect mixture of horror storytelling, narratives, and then on top of that, just has beautiful animation and great like, you know, like battle scenes. So I think they perfectly nailed it for what a battle anime horror is. But now that we've seen the god tier of that, now I want to see less Blue Exorcist, and I want to see literally a team of priests and fathers going around doing exorcisms in anime form. I think that can still be scary. It doesn't need to be jump scary, but I guarantee you the stuff, there is stuff there. More studios need to take chances on that and stop producing the 9,000th isekai or the older businessman that falls in love with the high school girl. Like we've got a lot of that. I think we'll live if you just cut a few of those out for the season and give us more horror content. Because that's why this is all up in the air right now. Because this is new ground for what anime is. And eventually, we as an anime community will be tired. Like, I hope so. Please be tired of the 9,000th isekai. So this way, they have to break into new stuff. And I guarantee you, that's when horror is going to have this huge surge. And Netflix will have already placed a bunch of pillars in what horror and animated stuff should look like. And then studios will kind of copy off that.
I think you touched on something interesting there where it was like, maybe the concern here is really just about budget, right? Because like, I talked about this earlier a little bit with Paranormal Activity, that was really cheaply made, and you can do cheap live action stuff horror wise, you know?
Right.
But in animation, there's no such thing as cheap, right? Like no matter what, it's expensive. And so it's probably harder to put together people who can do horror animation versus, like you say, the 9,000th, you know, isekai animation, like fantasy typical show and stuff. And so, yeah, I don't know. I agree that Jujutsu Kaisen does a lot of the horror stuff correct. Like the last arc that we saw was, I mean, that was straight out of a ghost story, right? Like, this girl went to school and something happened, and I think she's possessed, maybe. And like the other 2 kids that were with her, like they're dead now, and you're like, oh shit, okay, that's, you know. And you're right, that storytelling is very like. And the thing though is that Jujutsu Kaisen, they do some scary looking animation, man. Like Mahito is spooky. The first time you see the domain expansion from him, like. That was omega scary to me. That was legit. And like, if that was like more central to that thing, I think Jujutsu Kaisen could legitimately be scary. And like, I wonder
if there is one, I'd love to see that, right? Like, cause it's the reverse, right? Yu Yu Hakusho started off as a spirit detective and then became a battle anime. This could go from a battle anime to just full blown horror. You know, and I would love that.
I actually think that Jujutsu Kaisen proves my theory that they could do scary if that was like the central theme of the show. Unfortunately, I feel like Jujutsu Kaisen isn't like really like centralized on the horror elements necessarily. It just like borrows a lot from it. But like,
Right.
I think if you took Mappa's animators and you're like, yo, that creepy stuff that you did in Jujutsu Kaisen, let's just like keep those things and like let's like spook people. I bet you that would be legitimately scary.
I would love to see it. I won't say no because we haven't seen it. Right?
Yeah.
Everything that we're saying, we're talking
It's
right now
all
by the way at home,
theoretical.
it's all theoretical because there's just not enough out there. So obviously, you know, a good chunk of this, Xell and I are kind of like arguing back and forth in what is hypotheticals, but this is why more of it needs to be made.
Yeah.
Horror is popular. Horror, like if horror wasn't popular, you see it in all sorts of media nowadays. Like they draw tons and tons from horror. And that's because there's something about it, right? The chemicals it releases in our brains. We love, you know, like roller coasters, you know, like we love this stuff. Yet anime just hasn't done it, and they won't do more of it. And I could see what Zell's point here is budget. Because why make a scary show if it's genuinely scary? No one wants to watch it, right? But when you can make the isekai that could potentially blow up and be a cash cow,
Yeah.
you know, and like get 4,000 seasons,
And then
right?
Junji Ito falls by the wayside and gets animated by Studio D. And
that is criminal. But that's a whole nother thing of how he got shafted like that. And, like for such how iconic Junji Ito is. You would think A1 or at least somebody would step up.
No. I think like to kind of wrap this a little bit, like I think horror might be maybe the way we went into this is wrong and like why does horror suck in anime, but really more I think now that we've talked about it more that I feel like horror is just the most underexplored genre of anime.
It is.
And I feel like there are all these signs like because I went into this episode being like, oh yeah, just horror just sucks in anime, it'll never work. And then as we talked about it, I was like, wait a second, maybe it can work. And like we started to take things, and I thought this whole journey here was really interesting because now at the end of it all, I feel like horror can exist in anime, be legitimately scary, and really what it takes is for somebody to really just try and experiment and explore this space more. And I'm all for it. And like,
yeah,
I think
now
the
you can
signs are
join
there.
me when I get excited. Yo, Zell. I think there's gonna be a new horror show coming out. Have you seen it? I'll like
I don't
spam
know if
our
I'll go
chat
that
like
far.
19 times. but okay. So I mean, while we're like kind of like moving in this direction, I'd love to like I think, are there any horror franchises now that you think would make it pretty cool, like do well in the world of anime? Like, I'll just go ahead and throw one in there, right? One of the ones before you try to snipe it is Resident Evil. Mm-hmm. We're getting tons of live action stuff, and we're also getting like a 3D style animation movie with like Infinite Darkness and whatnot. But an anime version of Resident Evil would be amazing.
Yeah.
It would be perfectly like the way it just the storytelling is and the stories in Resident Evil. You can easily serialize that whole franchise, and it still keeps the consistent, because you throw some zombies here and there and whoa, right? But then at the end of the day, it's really just about mad scientists.
Yeah. I could totally see a Resident Evil like spin-off anime, like you keep Umbrella Corporation doing Umbrella Corporation things. They've caused some ruckus in Anime Raccoon City #2 and like I don't know.
Just drop in another timeline. yeah, like and so that's like one of the ones I think that would be really cool. Another that I think would be amazing, I kind of touched up on a little bit earlier, is something a little bit like The Conjuring. You watch The Conjuring and it's this couple and they go around, they exercise. Okay, well, I actually wouldn't expect you to watch it, and I know for a fact you would not be able to handle The Nun or Annabelle. So,
is that a challenge, Crim? Are you sure about that?
Why don't you watch that after this podcast, right?
Yeah,
I know what's going to happen. Your girlfriend's going to call me and like on Discord, like, yo, Josh can't sleep, and he says it's your fault. So, and now I can't sleep. So, because I think what The Conjuring is about this couple. They go around, they exorcise demons and ghosts and all things supernatural. I think that is a real thing that they could do in the world of anime, and nail it. Not the stupid Blue Exorcist stuff. I love Fire Force, but that's not what I'm talking about. Like a Latom and everything. I love that. Like, hell yeah. But I want an actual series where you go around exercising. And you see them doing the actual practices. You see all the weird movements and like, capitalize on like the whole like knee jerk reactions of like everything that's possessed. I think you could do that. And you put it in an anime series, and The Conjuring is the perfect thing because you can serialize that. They've already serialized the movies, right? We have 3 movies, and you can easily turn that into an anime. And like, yeah, you can call it Ghost Hunters, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
The Xell and Crim exercising demon show, whatever, right? I mean,
We sit here,
yeah, the double dragon pose, very scary, very scary.
Oh god, I'd make for the worst Ghostbuster of all time.
Or would it be the best, right? Because it's always the worst one that lives to the end, right? Because they're just like completely oblivious. Yeah. And it's always the one that's like either the first one that dies is always, the jock person. And then it's like the person that thinks they know it all because they've seen the movies. That's probably me. And then I die. But you'll be the one that makes it out because you're like, oh, I actually the meta, dude. I actually went into the cabin and I did read from the passage, which actually saved us.
Oh my god, I could see that.
And so like once again, I think there's definitely some franchises like that. Conjuring would be cool to see serialized. And of course, everyone at home listening or watching right now, I'd love to hear other franchises that you think would be really cool as an anime, because this is a topic I would love to talk to you about until the end of time. But we do have a time limit. So I want to get to the next thing. And I mean, like, first off, like, so that's one of the 2 franchises. Are there any horror franchises that you've seen that you think could make it into like anime?
I talked about this a little bit last time, but I still think that the Dark Souls universe is just like so perfect for like a horror thing. And I just love... I've only really played a couple of them. I've played Dark Souls 1, and I love that game. I've played Sekiro, which was also amazing. And so I think those would do well. A blast from the past, though. I remember a long time ago, this was like my maybe like 13th birthday. So this is, ancient history at this point. I got a game called Onimusha. Have you heard of Onimusha?
On PS2?
Yeah.
I remember
played
that.
the other games, but I played the first one when it came out, and it was scary. And I loved this sort of like ancient samurai, but like demons. I mean, okay, scary in the sense that like it had scary looking things and zombies and stuff. And
like cool
I like
creature
that
designs,
combination of stuff. And and like there's something really cool about ancient stuff plus zombies. Like I saw this Korean Netflix show that was about
Kingdom?
like
Kingdom. No, Kingdom's Chinese. That's a Chinese.
There's one where it was like ancient Korea
Train to
plus
Busan?
zombies.
Is Kingdom actually? Because that sounds like Kingdom on Netflix. Kingdom.
I'm looking. Yeah, that's
once
Korean.
again Netflix.
Wow, racist, Crim. You almost made me forget my heritage. Okay, it's Korean.
I was checking you. That's all. That's all.
But that one's that's Korean, and so like I love that thing a lot. And then I'm trying to think of what other
#Alive is another good one. Train to Busan. These are all like Korean zombie movies, by the way. Just like this is a whole nother separate topic. Korean zombie movies are on a whole nother level. We're still kind of like, haha, you get bit, check this out, you become a zombie, that's it. But like Korean horror movies are on a whole nother level right now. They are making the best stuff. They're not treading the water like how American zombie movies are just going like over the same stuff over and over and recycling it. They're doing new stuff, and I'm loving it.
I'm not sure what else is out there because, again, I'm not much of a horror connoisseur. I'm like digging through my brain right now. Like,
I mean, okay. But remember, it doesn't have to be scary because this is. I want everyone listening right now to like when you walk away from this podcast, and I want you to just think one thing, and it is that horror doesn't have to actually just be typical jump scares and stuff like that. So it can be something that just you think about. The random parts of the night. Like if you read Junji Ito's Circles, that's not scary when you read it. It's scary when you close your eyes and start looking at stuff. and so like that's I think the way you go about it. And I think that can be done in the space that is anime. And that's the one thing I want you to take away from this, and everyone watching to take away from this, or reading, listening, or whatever, however you're enjoying this.
If you're reading this, I'm really impressed.
Yeah, I don't know how you're reading this, but I would love to know how you ended up reading this. And on top of that, that's the way I think horror goes.
No.
And outside of just like going in circles and repeating that, I think that's how I'd like to wrap this. Is there anything you want to say before on our way out here?
No, I mean, look, like we were talking about this topic previously, and we were kind of because the original idea for this was kind of talking about what genres we think just don't work in anime, and really we were both like, well, it's just been horror that really has never hit the mark. And so I'm really happy that we actually got to talk through this, because like I feel like now I have a clearer understanding of this all, and like I feel like I've come around on this idea of horror anime too. And so
yeah,
I don't know, this was cool. This was really fun for me.
I hope studios can kind of pick up on that.
Wow.
And yeah, like the horror comedy, it can still exist. And that's the thing too. If you don't want to get scary, you still do horror comedy. You go make Luigi's Mansion an anime, and that'd be funny as hell, dude. I would watch that. I would watch that, or whatever you call it. Luigi's, not Luigi. You could be a ripoff, a spinoff, whatever, the knockoff brand of it. And because remember, you don't have to be scary. You can make horror comedy.
And I think in some ways this sort of trend is already happening in the way we've seen it with Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, where like I think people like these sort of darker themes and people vibe with it. Like, sure, in the corner you got My Hero Academia shining bright, being very happy and
plus
bubbly,
Ultra, like it's great.
But then on the other hand, like Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen are darker, bloodier, scarier, and I think people like that. And so I think we might see a trend, I guess. I would not be surprised if by this time next year there was like one really good horror anime that comes from a traditional Japanese studio that like starts a lot more of that type of thing. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. All right. And so yeah, pretty much let's go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you so much, everyone at home, for listening this along the way. Like, thank you so much. Thank you. If you'd like, if you feel inclined to, feel free to leave a like, a sub, and share with all your friends. You know, and also if you are for some odd reason listening to this and you're a studio exec, take a chance on that horror anime. You can. I don't need to know what my toilet in another world would do. So like the thing here is, just make sure you give a chance to those animes, because those are the ones that need to be made. And I even hit my elbow on my desk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really waiting. Prove me right, I guess, in this case, because like I really think it could happen. And I'm looking at you guys, Japanese.
Yeah,
studios.
Well, I don't know what pool we randomly have.
I'm threatening, you know. I'm gonna beat you up, Mr. Japanese.
No,
execs.
but like also, like if you have Venmo, I'm just kidding. But like legit, I think you should give it a chance if you are listening to this. And then on top of that, for those at home, talk about it in your circles. You know, see if it can work, like within your own circles, if horror necessarily has to mean scary. No. Other than that, though, thank you for watching. Thank you, Don, for editing. And thank you all for just continue to come back every week. And we'll be here for the next episode, episode 12. Hopefully it'll be a little less dark, if you would. I don't know if you can, Don. I mean, just you don't have to because DMCA stuff, but cue the spooky music. Xell and I are going off into the fog. Like and subscribe.
Share with 7 people or you'll die. Start the chain letter. Thanks for watching.